Do you know who can be the most dangerous? It's someone who has lived in deception for years and finally discovers the truth. Sadly, I never suspected my wife could betray me. Was I really that oblivious? It's incredibly difficult to see when everyone around you is hiding a terrible secret. Finally, I had the house to myself, a big screen for the game, 2 cold drinks down with more waiting in the mini cooler beside my favorite chair. And just then, the phone rang. I hoped it wasn't a pesky sales call or a robot. If it was, they were going to hear an earful. It was around 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night. Tracy usually worked late on Wednesdays, so I always planned a night of relaxation or entertainment. Tonight was a stay-at-home night. I had already devoured a Papa John's medium meats pizza with a couple of beers, and settled in to watch the Cubs game while sipping a few more Coronas. There were 2 more Coronas chilling in the cooler beside me and another 6 in the fridge in the kitchen. It was shaping up to be a fantastic evening. Tracy typically got home around 10 o'clock, took a quick shower, and by 11, we'd be snuggled up. Wednesday evenings were quiet at the Avondales, but this phone call was about to disturb that peace. I could sense it. Despite that, I picked up the call, feeling the weight of responsibility. It turned out to be Chell, Jacques' wife, Tracy's boss, who sounded distraught. Jacques had suffered a heart attack while working with Tracy, my wife, who had called 911. Paramedics had rushed him to the hospital in critical condition. Chell told me Tracy had gone with Jacques in the ambulance and would need a ride home later, as she planned to stay with him as long as necessary. I assured Chell I would come right away and conveyed my hopes for Jacques' swift recovery. Jacques had been Tracy's supervisor for 22 years, ever since she began working at his software company straight out of college. Over time, she had risen through the ranks to become his trusted confidant and essential collaborator, often referred to as his right-hand person or even his work spouse. When Tracy joined Jacques' company, I was already in a relationship with her, and over the years, our families had occasion to spend time together. Tracy always spoke highly of Jacques, describing him as an excellent boss who also ensured she was well compensated. Jacques, a French national, is a decade older than both Tracy and me, currently at the age of 55. He maintains a fit physique through regular exercise and exudes charisma, often commanding attention in social settings where both men and women are drawn to him. Despite our belief in a higher plan for everyone, regardless of personal care, I was taken aback by Jacques' sudden heart attack. Arriving at the hospital, I parked in the visitor's lot adjacent to the emergency room and inquired about Jacques at the front desk, explaining that I was the spouse of the woman who had accompanied him and that I was also searching for her. While speaking with the nurse, I noticed a pair of EMTs nearby, one of whom made a cryptic remark about a cock, leaving me puzzled but ultimately focused on finding Tracy. Shortly afterward, Tracy and Chell emerged from a room visibly upset, and we shared a tearful embrace. Tracy delivered the devastating news of Jacques' passing due to a massive heart attack. I stood in shock, unable to speak, as the 3 of us embraced tightly in the hallway, both women crying heavily. Chell, also a citizen of France, had been married to Jacques for 35 years. They tied the knot at the age of 20 and immigrated to this country when Jacques secured a job with an American software company at the advent of the computer era. They have a daughter named Amy who is 3 years older than my daughter Allison, aged 18. The resemblance between the girls is striking enough to mistake them for siblings. Jacques held Amy dear, and I couldn't help but think this would be especially tough on her. Just then, one of the EMTs approached me and inquired if I was Tracy's husband, confirming. I accepted Tracy's purse, which she had left in the ambulance upon arriving at the hospital, distancing myself from the tearful women. I took it in my left hand, expressing gratitude, and shook the EMT's hand with my right. As I began to loop the strap of the purse to tuck it away, I noticed something unusual, a bra nestled in the middle. Perplexed, I took a closer look and indeed found a bra tucked into the purse amidst the chaos of the women's wails when they emerged from the room. I hadn't really paid much attention to Tracy's appearance. It then struck me that she was, in fact, not wearing a bra. That struck me as odd. I thought to myself, I'm not sure how much longer we remained at the hospital with Chell before she decided it was time to leave. Amy was due to arrive from university in the morning, prompting Chell to prioritize getting some sleep. I drove Chell home and then took Tracy and myself back to our house. I planned to assist both women in retrieving their cars the following day, Chell's from the emergency room lot and Tracy's from her workplace lot. When we got home, Tracy didn't utter a word to me. She went straight to the main bathroom and took a shower. About 20 minutes later, she joined me in the family room, her eyes swollen and red from crying. Sitting on the sofa, she seemed distressed, so I left my recliner and joined her, embracing her tightly. Her breathing was uneven, and I could feel her body convulsing with sobs. I wanted to inquire about the braless incident, especially since she was supposed to be working with Jack, but I couldn't bring myself to broach the subject that night. Instead, I silently held her for another 20 minutes until she expressed her fatigue and went to bed. It was midnight, so I decided to retire as well. The next morning, I took a personal day. After freshening up, I offered to drive Tracy to her office to retrieve her car. However, she appeared visibly shaken and struggled to speak coherently. Before composing herself, she requested that I take her to Chell's place instead, where they would arrange for a cab to take them to the office to collect some of Jack's belongings. Tracy planned to then drive Chell to the hospital to handle paperwork and retrieve Jack's personal effects. Despite offering my assistance, she declined. This arrangement worked out well for me as I needed to locate the EMTs who responded to the emergency the previous night and clarify a few details. After dropping Tracy off at Chell's and receiving a brief update on Chell's condition, I headed straight to the hospital. I promptly obtained the names of the responding EMTs and was directed to their location. I located my targets at the fire station I was directed to, and they recognized me from the previous night. I focused on the individual who had handed me Tracy's purse, identified by his name tag as Gage, and inquired directly about the starting point of the emergency. Once again, someone struggled to respond to me. "What do you mean?" he asked suddenly, regarding me with suspicion. "My wife and Jack were supposed to be picked up from the Sofitel, but you didn't, did you? Is that why you referred to me as cock?" "Oh, damn. I didn't mean anything personal," he replied, his voice rising. "We've just had situations where the people checked into a room weren't who they claimed, and when things go wrong, we're blamed. Don't shoot the messenger. Take it easy, Gage. I'm not trying to blame you. I just want the truth." I had to look up cock, and I wasn't pleased with what I found, but that's not your problem. It becomes my problem if you lie about where you picked them up. "We started at the West Side Hotel," Gage responded. "They were about 15 minutes into the run when the guy collapsed and fell on your wife. She had to push him off to call 911, and in the meantime, she performed CPR. He was barely alive when we reached the ER." I processed the truth, requiring no further confirmation. Expressing gratitude to both, I departed, sensing their pitying gazes trailing me as I exited. Driving home, my thoughts swirled. Tracy had been intimately involved with Jack when he nearly succumbed to a heart attack. How long had this deceit persisted? Then, a revelation struck me like lightning. Allison and Amy's uncanny resemblance was no mere coincidence, they were siblings. Tracy had maintained this affair for at least 19 years. How had I remained oblivious for so long? I berated myself for naively trusting Trey. Jack has often worked late, occasionally enjoyed nights out with friends, and embarked on business trips. Together, they had their liaisons. Had these times occurred when Chell should have been unaware? Despite my occasional cluelessness, her obliviousness seemed improbable, especially considering the striking similarity between our daughters. Chell frequented Jack's workplace, seemingly friendly with Tracy. How could Tracy betray her like this? Tracy's car was parked in the garage upon my arrival home. Finding her in the family room sipping wine, my discontent must have been evident. "What's troubling you, sweetie?" she inquired innocently. Despite intending to remain composed, anger overcame me. "How long have you been involved with Jack?" I demanded, my voice dripping with venom. "He's Allison's father, isn't he?" Tracy's wine glass shattered as she leaped from the sofa in a frenzy. "How could you utter such an accusation?" she screamed, advancing toward me with intense fury. If looks could kill, her glare would have ended me on the spot. I refused to yield. I stood firm in my conviction, meeting her gaze with determination. Though I lowered my voice to a near whisper, my words were sharp as I spat out, "You can demand anything of me, but don't you dare lie and tell me I'm wrong. If you do, I'll make sure you regret it." In our 2 decades of marriage, and even before, I had never spoken to my wife with such vulgarity or threatened her physically. Her reaction was one of pure shock, her mouth hung open as if she wanted to retort, but the seriousness in my demeanor silenced her. She instinctively stepped back, perhaps sensing the intensity in my eyes. "You know what you did," I continued, watching her return to the sofa, disregarding the wine stain on the carpet. "The stress of your affair, coupled with the physical strain, likely contributed to his demise. Frankly, I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner, given how intimately involved you were." From the distressed expression on her face, it was evident that I had touched a sensitive topic. She glanced down at her hands, fidgeting for what felt like minutes, though it was likely only 10 seconds in reality. "Oh my God, do you think I'm responsible for his death?" she whispered. "I wonder if Chell thinks that too." "Why would Chell think that, unless she knew about your relationship?" "Did she know?" "She knew, and supported us almost from the start," Tracy murmured. "Sometimes, she even joined us, especially on business trips. She always believed it was right for me to find pleasure with Jack, for being such a crucial part of his business success. She was happy that I looked after him at the office while she took care of him at home." I sank into a seat, feeling dizzy and bewildered. So I was the odd one out, the only one kept in the dark. What about Allison? Does Allison know? Allison has known for 4 years. She's okay with it. Oh damn. Allison knows and she's okay with it. Oh God, I exclaimed, but that's not what I meant. Does Chell know that Allison is Jacques' child? Chell knows, and she's fine with it. Amy knows too. Well, I hope you all had a good laugh at stupid old Rick's expense. Even my daughter, his daughter, I suppose, knew and didn't tell me. Fantastic. I stormed out of the house. I ended up driving to a nearby park and simply sitting there for a couple of hours. Tracy called my cell a couple of times, but I ignored the calls and let them go to voicemail. I just sat and reflected. Despite considering myself intelligent, I felt like a complete idiot when it came to Tracy. I never even considered the possibility of her cheating on me. Blindly trusting her for nearly 19 years, I was utterly clueless. I couldn't help but wonder if there were others beside Jack. My mind was flooded with thoughts as it began to darken. I left the park and headed home. Upon entering the house through the garage, I noticed a faint light in the kitchen above the table. Tracy was seated in her usual spot with a cup of tea. She offered me a cup, but I declined and opted for something stronger from my liquor cabinet. Pouring myself a scotch, I took a seat in my chair across from her. "I can't even begin to express how sorry I am for hurting you," Tracy said softly, her gaze fixed on her hands. "I need to hear the whole truth now," I replied, my voice tinged with frustration. "You need to explain how you could betray me while claiming to love me. You need to tell me if you ever truly loved me and respected me. Don't you dare question my love for you ever." Tracy interjected urgently. I've always loved you, still do. It's just that I also love Jack. Some people believe you can only love one person at a time, but I know that's not true because I love two. Save it, just get on with it, I said, devoid of emotion. Tracy had joined Sofl when the company was nearly a year old. Like many small businesses, the small team wore multiple hats, worked long hours, and formed close emotional bonds. It was an exhilarating period for her, and she often recounted the challenges during our dates. Our relationship had started about a year before she joined the company. As Sofl grew and prospered, Tracy emerged as Jack's indispensable right-hand person, while Jack represented the company's dynamic face. Tracy essentially served as the cohesive force holding everything together. She excelled at juggling multiple tasks, and Jack increasingly relied on her as his indispensable partner. Interestingly, as Tracy and I grew closer outside of work, the bond between Tracy and Jack also deepened in the office. Tracy observed that her personal and professional lives seemed to be progressing in parallel. Although Tracy and Jack maintained professionalism in front of their colleagues, privately they grew even more connected, engaging in discussions ranging from mundane topics to intimate matters like sex and politics. Tracy, at 24, was strikingly beautiful with an athletic physique and long blonde hair, while Jack, at 34, was a well-built man with long wavy brown hair and a charming smile exuding an almost old-fashioned gallantry. Their first intimate encounter, Tracy recalled, happened naturally on an old sofa in Jack's office after a long day. Tracy confessed that she never felt guilty about being intimate with both me and Jack. Even after I married her a year later, it wasn't merely physical desire but rather a profound loving connection, distinct yet comparable to what she and I shared. However, Tracy felt unable to disclose this aspect of her life to me due to my strong stance against infidelity. She cherished both relationships and couldn't bear to give up either, while I remained unaware of the affair until she learned about it from Jack approximately 2 months later. Realizing that the affair would persist, Jack felt compelled to be completely honest with his wife, who had recently given birth to their first child. According to Tracy, Jack conveyed to Chell that although she and Amy would always hold the most significant place in his heart, he desired to reserve a portion of his affection for Tracy. Subsequently, Chell extended an invitation to Tracy to spend a weekend with Jack and her. I recall Tracy leaving for the weekend, citing her mother's illness as a pretext. Following that weekend, she gave her approval to the affair. Years later, when Tracy became pregnant, it was Chell who comforted her anxieties and decided on the course of action if the child was indeed Jack's. Given that both Jack and I had A+ blood, determining paternity was straightforward. Moreover, since I rarely spent time alone with both girls, any remarks about their resemblance were casually dismissed by either Chell or Tracy with a jest about my social life, thereby averting any suspicion. Tracy remarked that Chell regarded her almost as a younger sister and took pride in what she called Jack's little family. I sat in stunned silence as Tracy recounted her experiences without expressing any remorse for her actions, merely recalling events. Tracy paused, expecting a response from me. All I could think to ask was whether she and Jack had ever taken a break. When we were newly married and having sex almost every day, I added. She seemed embarrassed, avoiding eye contact before finally admitting they hadn't. She reminisced, that period of my life was so thrilling. I had 2 attractive men who loved and desired me, and I was constantly aroused. She explained her hygiene routine on days when she was intimate with Jack, ensuring cleanliness but acknowledging the possibility of sloppy seconds. She admitted to being mindful of minimizing any crossover but confessed to never allowing me intimate contact after being with Jack. Quite considerate of you, I muttered. It's funny, after all this time, I never really compared your sexual performances. Both of you are great lovers, caring and attentive, and similar in size. It wasn't about better or worse sex with Jack, it was just different, shaped by who each of you are/were. I must confess that I found some solace in the realization that my connection with the well-endowed stranger wasn't solely driven by lust. However, I was deeply wounded to learn that she harbored feelings for him in addition to me. I grew up believing in monogamy, the idea of one exclusive partner for each individual. Despite being the recipient of her primary intimacy, there was another person she was sharing that bond with. Tracy set her tea aside and gazed deeply into my eyes, as if attempting to peer into my very soul. I speculated, lacking a response to her unspoken inquiry, and words of wisdom eluded me. Tidying away my dose bottle in the cupboard, I placed my glass in the sink before ascending the stairs to bed. The reason for this action escaped me, as I was certain I wouldn't find any rest that night. Approximately 5 minutes later, Tracy joined me in bed, nestling up against my back. I feigned sleep, preferring not to exchange even a simple good night. I rose at my customary 5 a.m., completed my usual morning routine, and set off for work. Tracy was still asleep when I departed, indicating she had no intention of going to Softal. Presumably, she and Chell will need to resolve the situation following Jack's departure, however, that's their concern. Clearly, I had my own issues to address. Work has always provided me solace during turbulent times, and I hoped this pattern would persist. I work at Mayan Pharmaceuticals, where I serve as the Vice President of Sales. Despite being 45, I represent the new breed in the industry. With a background in chemistry, I possess a unique understanding of our products, manufacturing processes, and functionalities, unlike many of my counterparts in sales leadership. In fact, I played a role in developing one of our successful products, Cresol, a pill designed to reduce women's libido for those with excessive sexual desires. It's been a lucrative venture for us, and I've personally benefited from its success. I also earn a substantial salary, and combined with Tracy's income, we were living quite comfortably, a luxurious home in a fashionable neighborhood, 2 high-end cars, and fantastic vacations. Financially, neither of us will suffer after the divorce. There, I acknowledged it, the dreaded word I hadn't seriously considered until that moment, perhaps because it seemed inevitable to me since the discovery of Tracy's infidelity. With Allison away at college and out of the house, there's really no compelling reason for us to remain together, apart from the fact that Tracy broke my heart. This shouldn't be such a big issue. My boss, Arnold Kramer, and I have collaborated for 18 years. After spending 5 years as a chemist at a different pharmaceutical company, I met Ari at an industry convention, and we engaged in a conversation about various topics. He suggested I explore sales and subsequently offered me a position in his company. Intrigued by the challenge, I made the move. Ari's evaluation of my abilities proved entirely accurate, and both of us have reaped significant rewards from it. Not only do we have a productive working relationship, but I've also discovered that he's a genuinely good person, and we've cultivated what I anticipate will be a lifelong friendship. Ari has been married to his wife, Lauren, for approximately 30 years. He has 2 adult children and, 5 grandchildren. Despite being 52, he exudes the energy of someone much younger. He possesses a keen intellect and isn't hesitant to recruit other intelligent individuals to join his team. I like to believe I'm one of them. Ari appeared genuinely concerned when I informed him of Tracy's infidelity and my decision to divorce her. He inquired if I was certain about her unfaithfulness, to which I confirmed without delving into specifics. He respected my need for time to process and plan, however, he did provide me with the contact information for the attorney representing Mayan. Ari values loyalty to those who perform well for him and had confidence in the Mayan team, especially in their divorce division, which catered to individuals in better financial standing. He encouraged me to take whatever time I needed, though I assured him that only intermittent absences would suffice, as the case seemed straightforward. Living in a no-fault state, we both aimed to act in the best interest of our daughter, Allison, and had separate pension plans and could easily split the proceeds from the house sale. Wow, did I miss that one completely? When I arrived home from work that evening, Tracy had dinner ready, my favorite, spaghetti supreme, and had uncorked a nice bottle of Merlot. Things seemed so promising that I couldn't bring myself to remind her that Jacques was the wine expert. I preferred my drinks distilled. It's hard to keep everything straight when you're juggling multiple relationships. Tracy kept up her usual cheerful chatter during dinner, pretending as if nothing had changed between us. I waited for about 10 minutes before cutting through the facade, finally uttering those dreaded 4 words, "We need to talk." "No we don't," she snapped back almost immediately. I was taken aback by her response and her tone. I had discovered, and she had confessed to, a decades-long affair with her boss. She knew how strongly I felt about cheating. How could she expect me to forgive her? "I was hoping we could discuss this like adults before I proceed with legal action," I said as calmly as possible. "You can do whatever you want, but I'm not giving you a divorce," she said, irritation creeping into her voice. "The fact is, you love me and I love you, and I won't let you go. I'll fight you every step of the way. You're being foolish and risking the best thing you've ever had just because your pride is hurt," I began to reply, but she interrupted me before I could finish. "Before you learned about Jack and me, did I ever give you any reason to doubt my love for you? Did I ever mistreat you in any way? You received all the affection you desired, and I ensured your well-being in every aspect, physically, mentally, emotionally. Aren't we each other's closest confidants? If you hadn't stumbled upon it by chance, you would have remained blissfully in love with me until your last breath. You would have been none the wiser. Can't we return to that?" "No, because I did find out. Your love for me isn't as genuine as you claim, because otherwise you wouldn't have given yourself to another man, both physically and emotionally. You knew it was wrong, so you kept it concealed from me. I don't consider 2 decades of deceit as love. It's bad enough that you've been involved with another man for 2 decades, but you confessed to loving him as well. You've shared intimacy with him just as you have with me. How does that demonstrate love for me? Let's put aside the physical aspect for a moment, if that's even possible. Can't you see that every bit of love you gave him was stolen from me?" I yelled back at her. "He understood that, but I knew you wouldn't, so I never told you. And now you're proving me right. He understood I wasn't capable of understanding, because I wouldn't have accepted you having another partner, qua SATH husband. That's utter nonsense. I wasn't foolish enough to let you do that willingly, so you made the choice for yourself, solely for yourself. This was all about your desires. Can you fulfill them and believe me if I hadn't discovered it? I would have lived my life happily ignorant and the biggest fool. You could have engraved it on my damn tombstone. Here lies Rick Avondale, the world's happiest fool. He thought life was perfect because he had no idea his wife had 2 husbands. The viewing and funeral took place 3 days later, on a Monday, but I didn't attend either. Instead, I carried on with my routine, heading to work like any other morning. Upon returning home, I found Tracy and Allison still in their funeral attire in the kitchen. Although my daughter had come home from college for the occasion, when I approached her to offer a hug, she withdrew from my touch, turned away, and softly cried. Tracy, sensing the tension, placed her hand on my arm, silently signaling for restraint. Typically, I would have respected the situation and backed off, but these circumstances were far from ordinary. Frustration bubbled within me, audible even as a growl under my breath. Gathering some essentials, I swiftly packed a bag and left without further ado. Tracy bombarded my phone with calls almost immediately after my departure, all of which I ignored. Allison, to her credit, didn't sugarcoat the situation. She had made her judgment, casting me as the villain in this drama, and seemed determined to make me suffer. In that moment, it became painfully clear that she no longer considered me her father, neither biologically nor emotionally. It was a crushing realization. The following day, I took some personal time to visit the bank and separate our accounts, closing joint credit cards and establishing new ones in my name alone. I also arranged a meeting with the lawyer, recommended by Ari, squeezing in an appointment for Thursday. When I visited the lawyer on Thursday, I had been awake for 3 days straight. Ironically, his name was Mike Squelch, which didn't inspire much confidence in his legal prowess. Despite my exhaustion, I didn't think there was much to discuss. I provided him with a detailed account of the situation and expressed my desire to end the marriage swiftly, claiming my rightful share. Additionally, I insisted on pursuing child support from Jack's estate for our daughter. If she were no longer considered my responsibility, then her biological father should bear the financial burden. I informed Mike that I was done being taken advantage of. Mike seemed to agree with my plans, but he warned that if Tracy opposed the divorce, it could lead to mandatory counseling and prolonged legal battles. Unfazed, I instructed him to proceed. True to his word, on the following Monday Tracy was served with divorce papers at her workplace, Sofitel. Judging by the timing, I assumed she received them at 10:07 a.m. As just a minute later, our receptionist informed me of an angry call from Tracy on line 3. Throughout the week, I had deliberately ignored Tracy's calls and messages on my phone, directing my own staff to divert her calls to my voicemail, a directive they diligently followed. However, I realized that avoiding her indefinitely was not feasible. Hence, I instructed Marlene, our head receptionist, to connect her calls directly to me. "You insufferable jerk," I promptly ended the call after her initial outburst. 15 seconds later, the second call came through. "Don't you dare hang up on me." I terminated the call once more, pondering how long it would take for her to understand the necessity of civility if she wished to communicate with me. The third call took a bit longer to materialize. When I answered, she spoke in a hushed tone, evidently struggling to maintain composure. "You've won this round. We need to have a conversation," she stated. "Marvelous," I responded with forced cheerfulness. "Contact my attorney, Mike Squelch, at X to arrange a meeting with us. It might be beneficial for you to have your own attorney present as well, it could expedite matters." The appointment was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Until then, I stayed in a nearby motel, occasionally visiting my old house to mow the lawn and collect mail and some of my belongings. When Tracy saw me arrive at the house for the first time, she attempted to greet me as if I were her long-lost husband and hugged me in the driveway. I pushed her away and entered the house. "You didn't have to air our problems out in the driveway like that," she remarked. "If I'm such a jerk, why not just divorce me?" I replied dryly. The meeting with the lawyers took place on a Friday afternoon at 3. Being a gentleman, I let Tracy present her argument first about loving me completely but also keeping a place in her heart for Jacques. She argued that now that he was deceased, everything should revolve around me. "Are you willing to throw away 20 years of marriage over this?" she asked. "Does our love mean so little to you?" "No. It's because our love meant so much to me that we have to end this marriage," I retorted. "You had my heart completely and deceived me to get it. How can I not see this as a betrayal of trust, the very foundation of marriage? You knew what you were doing was wrong, so you betrayed my trust to get what you wanted, both physically and emotionally. But you knew, and accepted it, and I was deceived. This divorce isn't my fault, it's about your selfishness and betrayal. I would never have tolerated sharing you physically with another man, but sharing your love with another man crosses an even bigger line. It hurts more than if you had simply had a cheap affair with someone else. You loved him, slept with him, and even had his child. Just because I didn't know doesn't make it right. You both stole from me. It's fortunate he died of a heart attack that day, because if he hadn't, I would have shot him." Tracy let out a gasp as my final words hit her. Tears were already streaming down my face. "Throughout all of this, you never once apologized for cheating on me," I pressed on. "You said sorry for causing me pain, and maybe you're sorry for getting caught, but I don't believe you're truly remorseful for your actions, Rick. I believe we can salvage our relationship. Please, let's not go through with the divorce, she pleaded. Our relationship, Tracy? It was our marriage. There shouldn't have been your part and my part, it was supposed to be just us forever, I replied. Mike glanced at Tracy's lawyer and remarked, I think we're finished here. Your client needs to sign the documents and return them to us. Tracy's lawyer, a stern-faced middle-aged African-American woman, nodded solemnly and extended her hand for Mike to shake. Some minor details were sorted out over the next couple of weeks, and 3 months later, our divorce was finalized. 2 days following the finalization of the divorce, I instructed Mike to initiate legal action against Jack's estate, essentially seeking child support and college expenses. Though Mike articulated it more formally, I might not have pursued this course had Allison not made it explicit at the funeral that she no longer wanted any association with me after dedicating 18 years to raising that child as my own. This is the respect I receive. However, I suppose Allison had 4 years to contemplate it after Tracy informed her, and in her perspective, I was no more than a fool. 14 years of genuine, eternal care wasted. So, I didn't take offense when Mike proposed compensating for the lost respect with real money, precisely $1 million. I admired Mike's approach. I anticipated a call from Chell once she was served, but instead, it was Tracy on the line. Chell must have thought I'd take the news better coming from Tracy, but she was mistaken. Is this another way to retaliate against me? Are you facing financial difficulties? Tracy questioned. When I answered, well, greetings to you too, Mrs. Avondale. How thoughtful of you to call, I wasn't oblivious to the reason for her call. You do realize this makes you appear incredibly insensitive, don't you? She remarked. Do you realize I spent 18 years raising someone else's child while you, Shell, and Jack had a good laugh at my expense, and now that child thinks I'm nothing but a fool? I couldn't care less about your opinions. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I suppose Tracy must have conveyed my stance to Chell, along with my stubbornness, when I believed I was right. Because after initially attempting to negotiate through her lawyer, she ultimately sent me a check for the $1 million. As it turned out, a few months later, Chell could easily afford that $1 million, as she sold Softal to a Japanese company for $8 million. With Jack out of the picture, it was likely a savvy business decision. That could have been the end of the story, but as the late newscaster Paul Harvey used to say, and now for the rest of the story. 2 days following the sale of Softal, $2 million was transferred into an account under my name in the Cayman Islands. This sum constituted my finder's fee for Nakatomi Lottie successfully acquiring Softal within 9 months, as stipulated in a deal agreed upon by an unidentified Nakatomi attorney and myself. The terms of the agreement specified that regardless of my actual involvement or how the acquisition transpired, as long as Nakatomi completed the purchase by a certain date, I would be entitled to the finder's fee. However, once that date passed, the deal became null and void. At this point, you may be curious about my role in the Softal deal. It's somewhat convoluted, but essentially, I wasn't entirely forthcoming earlier in this narrative. While much of what I've recounted is rooted in reality, some elements were embellished, a performance on my part that could have rivaled an Academy Award-winning act, portraying myself as completely oblivious. Let me elaborate. Up until about a month before Jack passed away, I was completely unaware of what was going on. Then, out of the blue, a Nakatomi lawyer approached me seeking my assistance in negotiating a deal with HC for Softal. Why do you think I can help, apart from the fact that my wife is closely associated with Jack? I asked, genuinely curious. Because we recognize your intelligence, and we believe you're capable of handling the challenge and reaping the rewards of outsmarting the man who has been deceiving you for years, the lawyer replied. To say I was stunned would be an understatement. Tracy was being unfaithful, and this Japanese individual knew about it. It was unbelievable. It turned out Nakatomi had thoroughly researched several companies, leaving no stone unturned. They easily uncovered details about Jack, Tracy, Chell, and even their daughters. They correctly assumed that I would be motivated to assist them. However, time was of the essence as they were considering other software firms, and I had to act within a 9-month time frame. Initially, they presented me with proof of Tracy's unfaithfulness, photos, videos, phone records, travel receipts, everything. I had all the ammunition to expose both of them. Then they made me an offer. Despite already having a comfortable income, they dangled $2 million to assist them in wresting control of the company from Jack. Frankly, I was already inclined to help without the financial incentive, but I kept that to myself. My priority was to strategize my actions and ensure the money would come to me post-divorce, avoiding any splitting since we reside in a no-fault state. However, I needed to compose myself to avoid revealing my hand prematurely. My initial, albeit fleeting, impulse was violent, waiting for their next rendezvous, breaking in, and taking drastic measures. But the prospect of spending my life as Bubba's cellmate didn't sit well with me, so I opted to maintain composure, continuing to feign ignorance, a skill I'd honed for 2 decades. Already briefed on what I discovered about Tracy and Jack, I omitted the details of my source when I spoke to Ari. We spent a late night at the plant, sipping Don Julio tequila and brainstorming solutions. After consuming about half the bottle, Ari remarked with sincerity, "Isn't it ironic that the guy who invented Syl has his wife cheating on him? You should have slipped her some of that stuff, Rick." That's when it clicked for me, though I kept my revelation to myself. I shouldn't have given it to her, I mused silently. I should have slipped some of that stuff to him. Hold on, 2 problems solved with 1 action. One of the notable benefits of Syl is its lack of contraindications compared to most major drugs. In fact, there's only one: provided the prescription is followed correctly, it should not be taken by men at all. While it effectively suppresses a woman's libido, it inexplicably causes a spike in men's blood pressure and can lead to a fatal heart attack. All I needed was to somehow get it into Jack's possession. Jack and I are both members of the same golf course, and we occasionally play together with 2 other guys as a foursome. I arranged for us to play as a foursome the following Saturday, with a planned stop at the restaurant for a leisurely lunch. After the first 9 holes, the opening 9 holes went well, and we enjoyed a leisurely 90-minute break for lunch and drinks before heading out for the second 9. Now, bear in mind I have a knack for salesmanship. So, while we were casually dining and having drinks, I casually remarked to Jack, "Are you doing all right, buddy? You seem a bit fatigued." Jack, being a decade older than the rest of us, was aware of the age gap, and my question clearly got to him. I could see him pondering when I suggested, "We could push back our tea time by 30 minutes to allow you some extra rest." "Nah, just a tad tired, but no need to change plans for me." "I'll manage," he replied. Truth be told, I didn't think he appeared tired at all, but I decided to play on his insecurities about being the elder in the group. "I have just the thing for you," I said, producing a small bag of unmarked white pills from my pocket, something I keep for myself to take the edge off and keep me going smoothly through the day. I passed Jack the small bag containing 5 pills. "Take one of these over the next few days. If you enjoy them, I can get you more next time we go golfing," I offered. Jack took 1 pill from the bag, swallowed it, and washed it down with bourbon on the rocks. He pounded his chest like a monkey and let out a small Tarzan-like yell. "Let's go, guys. I'm feeling energized," he exclaimed cheerfully. In reality, within a short time, he probably did feel the effects of the pill. An increase in blood pressure can give you a boost, which is why athletes focus on getting pumped up for their games. However, too much of a good thing. For those wondering why I handed him a small bag instead of a pill bottle or box, the intention was for him to dispose of the bag once he finished the pills, rather than keeping it around where it might be discovered if someone searched his pockets. During the expected events on Wednesday night, those 5 pills were intended to last until Wednesday, which was when Jack and Tracy typically rendezvoused. Combine a man's already elevated blood pressure from a passionate encounter with a woman other than his wife, along with medication known to raise and spike blood pressure, and you have the perfect recipe for a heart attack likely to be fatal. However, since it would appear like a standard heart attack, and given the limited resources of our small city's crime investigation unit, any further inquiry into the matter would only occur if something seemed suspicious. Therefore, I ensured to fully embrace my role as the betrayed husband, behaving exactly as I had when I first learned of the affair a month prior. I must admit I even surprised myself with my acting skills. 2 days after the funds landed in my account and swiftly got transferred elsewhere, I treated Ari and his spouse to an extravagant dinner under the guise of expressing gratitude for Ari's exemplary leadership and loyalty during my difficult times. Little did he know it was actually a gesture of appreciation for his unwitting role in my scheme for vengeance. With Jack out of their picture in both women's lives, the connection between Tracy and Chell noticeably chilled, particularly as Chell had time to reflect on Jack passing away practically in Tracy's embrace. Chell seemed quite annoyed when Tracy failed to persuade me to drop the lawsuit against the estate for overdue child support. Little did Chell know, Tracy wouldn't have benefited from that money anyway due to our divorce. Shortly after sorting out my support payments, Chell decided to let Tracy go from her job. Rumors soon circulated in Nakatomi circles about Joe and Tracy's affair, which effectively ended Tracy's career in business administration. Apparently, having your boss pass away in bed with you isn't exactly great for one's professional reputation. But don't feel too sorry for Tracy, she emerged from it all with a net worth of about $1 million, so she won't be struggling financially anytime soon. Plus, she's now in a position to support her daughter. Speaking of whom, Allison made it clear she wants nothing to do with me after Jack's passing, turning me away repeatedly. I guess that's the result of all those years I spent raising her, providing for her, coaching her soccer teams, and attending all her dance recitals. Well, I won't make that mistake again. As for myself, I think I'm doing pretty well considering I lost my life partner after 20 years. It took time, but I've started dating again. Though I'm not sure if I'll ever fully trust another woman or find someone who compares to what I thought I had with Tracy. Still, I'm free from obligations with a net worth of around $5 million. I've moved into semi-retirement now, focusing on personal projects. Perhaps one day I'll create a pill that helps clueless husbands instantly detect a cheating wife. Now that would truly benefit humanity.